$10,000 to $100,000 bounty for the Antifa criminals who attacked Matthias Thorpe. This is an interview with Matthias Thorpe of Resist Marxism and associated with Boston Free Speech, who was brutally attacked by Antifa and valiantly fought back on December 1st, 2017 in Cambridge, Massachusetts, outside the Harvard Coop bookstore, where Mark Bray gave a talk for his book Antifa, the Anti Fascist Handbook. Alex Jones has offered $10,000 bounty on the heads of each attacker, and there are an estimated of 6 to 10 attackers, so perhaps up to $100,000 reward for this, folks.
Let me put a bounty right now on the identity, $10,000 on the identity of anybody that attacked you, and I do pay these bounties. Nothing violent, just give me the bounty, give me the identity, give me the video and where they're at. $10,000 bounty on all these people, folks. I'll pay it all out. InfoWars, $10,000 bounty. You got to get to me first. It leads to their arrest, just their arrest, not conviction. $10,000 bounty on each of their heads.
Also, Matthias could use some help paying his hospital bills, so please consider giving. As always, there are links for everything in the description. I recommend seeing my first video about this to get the full context, but it's not really necessary. But if you want to see that, see the first link in the description below. It's my interview with Chris, Matthias's friend. This is the first of a few installments. Matthias and I couldn't stop talking. We went for almost 3.5 hours, and all of it's interesting. But anyway, here is the first installment. Enjoy. Ladies and gentlemen, we are speaking with Matthias Thorpe, who you know from my previous video was attacked there by the, what was it called, the Harvard Coop bookstore, which serves as the bookstore for MIT and for Harvard University, I believe. And that would be Cambridge, Massachusetts there?
Yeah, it's right in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The bookstore supplies textbooks to Harvard University, and then there's another Coop down in Kendall Square, which supplies textbooks over to MIT. So it's not necessarily owned by Harvard University, but it's one of those, private organizations, private bookstores that students have to go to in order to get their learning materials.
Right, and so that was, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, on the first, or was this the second? There was a talk by Mark Bray, the author of Antifa, the Anti Fascist Handbook. Yeah,
he talked the night of December 1st, around 7 p.m. And we went there. We had a group of so there were 2 other people that came, and then there was actually a female who we had recognized from some of the free speech rallies who had came on her own to come listen, and she came up and met up with us. So we ended up with a total of 4 people.
Right. Would that be the woman that was with you guys on Chris's Periscope? You were talking outside the store?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey everyone.
Hi.
Hi. So we just went to the Mark Bray talk on Antifa, Anti Fascist Handbook, and we literally, Anti-First Amendment, exactly. We literally just got kicked out of that place right over there, right there.
Harvard Coop.
The Harvard Coop.
We didn't just get kicked out. We got escorted out.
We got escorted out.
Yeah. So we had a guy. He tried to intimidate us. And somebody pushed one of our other people here in the group. They ended up calling the police on us. We got escorted out of the building. And so, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be able to go back into Harvard Coop anymore without somebody saying that I'm not allowed there.
I actually, a guy was trying to fight me, for just saying, Boston's brainwashing you. Yeah.
Oh, that guy was mad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he needed to get paid.
Yeah.
And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was Rose City Antifa, or perhaps it was North Shore Antifa, were posting, as he was broadcasting his Periscope video, saying, go ahead.
Yeah, so we don't actually know if they saw that Periscope. They're claiming, they're sort of using that as a basis for the attack.
Right.
Although that Periscope that happened, it was about an hour before the attack. So we had been standing outside for, I would say, at least 40 minutes outside of the entrance to the Coop. Right. We had some productive I had a productive conversation with one guy. He was talking about Charles Murray, and he said a lot of people are organizing around speakers who he finds to be not that controversial. So he thought that Charles Murray was an example because he came to speak at Harvard. And while a lot of the people there, a lot of the protesters had said, you know, we're not necessarily going to shut him down, but we want to make our presence known. But he asked a question to Mark Bray about that, and I don't remember Mark's answer. But he came out and he saw me and he started talking with me about communism, about kind of what I was trying to get out with my question and never really got a chance because I was interrupted. And yeah, we talked for about 20 minutes and then he had to go. And there was somebody around the corner who I thought was a little suspicious. And that's why I just said hello and was just trying to figure out what his motives were. And it seemed like he was just an innocent bystander, somebody who was just standing there, excuse me, and was just maybe waiting for somebody or waiting for something. And we had a really long conversation because he didn't really have a good, solid foundation into what Antifa was, what the free speech movement, you know, he was kind of one of those people who just read the media and sort of tried to make his own interpretation of everything.
Yeah, I talk with about 12 people like that a day.
Yeah, so it's often very difficult to kind of help these people understand what you know, people who are on the right are going through, and probably people who are maybe more liberal who oppose sort of the extremism.
Right.
But and we had a discussion about Charlottesville and kind of what I interpreted Charlottesville to be, and also we're just talking about people who sort of make, so like Pepe the Frog, and people who like drink milk, and people who do Nazi salutes and stupid stuff like that on the internet. Yeah, like this.
Pepe the Frog, drinking some milk, making a white power symbol.
That was one of the questions actually in the lecture that a girl asked. She said, "Is drinking milk and Pepe the Frog dog whistles that we should worry about?" So I couldn't help but laugh, and I told her before Mark could answer, I said, people do this because you get so upset about it. That's why they do it.
Right, and they choose things that everybody does. I mean, of course, if you say that this is a Nazi symbol, then all of a sudden you can find any politician you want to think of, almost any famous person you want to think of. At some point, they did that.
Yeah.
And they drank milk. You might as well say, you know, people who breathe, that's a signifier that they're a neo-Nazi. Yeah,
it's kind of ridiculous, and I can understand how people maybe get a little hesitant when somebody jokes around throwing around Nazi salutes. And I still don't know what my opinion is on that. Most of the time when people do that stuff, I'm just like, yeah, people do stupid stuff. And people do things just to like let some steam out, to be kind of tongue-in-cheek. And so when Antifa was trying to use that video of us outside pretty much trash-talking them,
right,
to say, oh, they condone violence or they wanted to beat us up, is absolutely preposterous.
Yeah, I watched the video and I think that's ridiculous. Anybody who says that you were trying to threaten or incite violence is either being intellectually disingenuous or they're so paranoid and stupid that their emotions are bouncing around in their head and they're not listening to the context, they're not listening to your tone, they're not listening to what's going on there. Yeah, any reasonable person who would watch that, and I'll even play the clip in about a few seconds, would not think that that what you said in any way deserves that, you know, a physical retribution, okay? Like, I can say to my neighbor, I'm going to shoot you in the face, right? That doesn't justify him jumping over the fence and just beating me up. Unless I have a gun in my hand or something like that. It's bullshit. I know exactly what you're saying, and you're absolutely right. And believe me, from a more objective standpoint, no reasonable person would construe that as fighting words.
You know, it says punch commies. That's his thing. Punch commies.
Yeah. Punch commies. Fuck commies.
Yeah. Alright, I'm gonna go find...
These boots right here are, like, perfect for commie, like, assholes. Like, seriously.
Alright, we'll be back on later.
throughout that whole video, you can see that we are kind of moving from talking about serious things to kind of joking around a little bit.
Yeah, I would call it banter. You know, I would call it banter,
yeah.
And it's something that human beings naturally do in a social unit to sort of signal to each other that, hey, look, you know, I'm not afraid. That's all you were saying is, I'm not afraid. And,
exactly.
you know, that comes across that you're not afraid, but you weren't threatening. You're not talking about hurting people or anything like that. You were just saying, look, I'm not afraid. And at the same point, I think, you know, you were also signaling to your two friends there that, hey, don't worry, because I'm not afraid, so you don't be afraid. That's just normal. I mean, maybe I'm saying this because I'm a psychology student, but I think your average person would agree with me and just sort of get what I'm saying.
It's really interesting how you sort of analyze that, because, yeah, I think when you go into this, sort of telling people that you're scared, and trying to sort of portray a bit of confidence.
Yes.
I think is very useful, because that, like I said, that room, when I asked my question, and many people in the room, very hostile, very threatening, I would say.
Yes.
From maybe not a physical perspective until like after the event was over,
right.
But definitely in a very verbally hostile environment. And yeah, and that's why I chatted build the wall and Trump and just trying to kind of show, hey, we're here in for it, and you know, you're not going to stop us.
Now, unfortunately, I do not have a recording of Matthias and friends heckling, saying build a wall for a few seconds. If anyone has that recording, please send it to me. My contact info is below in the description. But speaking of heckling, a man asked a question about heckling, and Mark Bray responded, and more or less he said that heckling is a good response to speech that they do not approve of.
But can you be super vigilant, show up and challenge vigorously, even heckle? Harvard Law School have rules that allow for heckling. Show up, heckle, protest, object strenuously, but not shut it down.
Well, I mean, but I think that there's an interesting question there. I mean, if you're heckling someone to the point where they can't express themselves, are we starting to find some common ground? Like when Richard Spencer spoke at the University of Florida, the event was not shut down. The students showed up and chanted football slogans over his talk so no one can hear him. I mean, so I don't think actually that these two perspectives are worlds apart. But would you heckle the whole time so no one can hear, or like let him just say half of what he wants to say? So I mean, even in that direction, it's not entirely clear where we're getting at. To me, the question is this a message that we as a society approve of or not, and to act accordingly? But you know, ultimately, people are going to disagree about this. If you show up and heckle. Other people maybe will shut it down.
So that makes them kind of hypocritical if they were angry about the heckling coming from Matthias and Chris and etc. Okay, now let's move on.
Well, doing that for a few seconds, 30 seconds is not a disruption, as we had a Boston Herald article came out that just completely slandered myself and other people who went to the event as
really?
like these. Yeah, I'll send it to you. I'll send you the article.
Sure, yeah, definitely. I'll put that in this video.
We wrote a letter to the Boston Herald correcting kind of the statements, because they basically used the video from my account of what happened in the Gateway Pundit article. And they used that article as kind of their basis for interpreting what actually happened.
Oh, okay.
And I called them, I think it was like Sunday night. I called and I said, hey, I would like to do an interview with you guys. I called on Monday after I saw the article come out and said, hey, this is mislabeling and misleading. I said, I would really appreciate it if you would, get on the phone with me and do an interview and correct the record. Still nothing. So today I sent a letter to the editor with a formal statement about what happened, about 350 characters, something like that. And we'll see if they get back to me, because they're not going to be in a good situation when it comes to going to court against my attackers, because I could take them to court as well for libel and slander.
Sure, definitely. And I would definitely recommend it. I mean, one of the things that I try to do with my YouTube channel is to catch these people who write these things in their lies. And it's hard to do, because you spend hours and hours each day trying to get them on the phone just to get maybe one person on the phone. Yeah. But I have caught about, I think, 2 on video. One of them actually threatened to sue me and told YouTube they better take it down, so I had to take that down. But I
was that the journalist?
Well, it's one of, Lisa Jeong Perry.
Okay.
She's one of the people who said that Patriot Prayer is far right or alt right or something like that. And then when I asked her about it, she's like, "Oh, can you ask my editor?" And and then I said, "No, it's clear that you're just a propagandist. You're not a journalist." And then I put that on the air, and then yes, they threatened to sue me.
Yeah, I just saw that. I actually just watched that like right before I got on the phone with you. And I saw her after you asked that question, she paused and had no idea what to say. And then finally, yeah, you were basically calling her out on the fact that she had no journalistic integrity, that she had no desire to actually figure out what these people were about. And that's the thing. We're struggling because, like I said, I'm not even really like right-winger. I'm probably center-right at the moment.
Okay.
But I do support a lot of Trump's policies. Part of it is just, I think, out of anger from kind of the response from the left.
Yeah.
Because it's become so, like, the hypocrisy is just insane.
Oh, yeah.
So I just want to do everything that sort of just destroys their movement so that they can somehow, because they're not getting it. Like, they continue to try to come up with new schemes, more and more schemes. And it's like, you guys have a terrible plan for what you want to accomplish. Come up with a better plan. Quit trying to stick with the same. It's like, what was it? Like Einstein said something. I was like, when you do the same thing over and over again, it's definition of insanity.
Yeah. Either I think it was insanity. I was going to say stupidity, but I think it's insanity. Yeah. But yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. That quote is, and it makes sense. Also, the intelligence is at least in part defined by the ability to perceive patterns and to act upon them accordingly. So if you're doing the same mistake over and over again, that's by definition, at least by how some science defines it, that's the definition of low intelligence right there.
Yeah. I was just going to say, the only strategy that seems to be happening right now after the election is resisting Trump. And I'm just like, that's not a strategy, because historically speaking, and just in terms of human interaction, I think that you have to find common ground. You have to figure out how to, make a compromise between things. You're never going to get everything that you want. I mean, I worked in management before, and there were many times I was like, but you have to realize, you have to pick your battles, and you have to realize what's worth it. Yeah. But they just blow up everything. Everything that happens is a big thing. And I was a Bernie supporter actually at one time. And then I started getting these emails about everything Trump did, and every reaction was just, like I said, hysterical. And so I said, you know what, I don't want to be a part of this. I actually did a little bit more research about Bernie, and I was like, ooh, the whole socialist, communist stuff.
I'm with you on that. Your experience on that parallels mine. The same thing happened to me, and then I found out, I don't know, do you know who Lawrence Lessig is?
Never heard of that person.
Well,
no.
he was a single issue candidate. All he wanted to do was to overturn he wanted to make it's the same goal as the Wolfpack. He wanted to establish a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United, so to get big money and secret PACs and super PACs out of politics, and basically try to get as much campaign contribution money out of politics as possible. And just so that, basically it's like whoever has the most money in their campaign is most likely to win. And now that we don't know who they're even getting their money from half the time, that's a big problem. So Lawrence Lessig wanted to get rid of that. But I'm sorry, I sidetracked you rudely. So yeah, you were initially a Bernie supporter, then you found out that it's a socialist Democrat, and then he has this past.
Yeah, and sort of I had, I think, maybe a sort of Marxist view on things when it came to the rich and the bourgeois. But I was mostly just trying to, I was diving into, I think, sort of the Marxist theories in an attempt to figure out, well, maybe it would be like, universal basic income was something that I was definitely looking to support. I was thinking, well, maybe if we all sort of we're able to start economically on the same level ground, then maybe we could build ourselves up. But there's definitely a lot. It's a complex issue. There's a lot that goes into that. And I think also I started gaining a better respect for capitalism, because I think that in a way, like I went to school for engineering. So I didn't have the, kind of brainwashing classes where people go in and, to the more humanities majors and sort of get this, social justice training and sort of this anti-American, I think, kind of look at things.
Right.
It's very like, oh, the European settlers that came here were such horrible people. I mean, like, yeah, they did some pretty bad things, but the point is not to go back in time and try to solve what happened then. I mean, and I think you can relate to this from like a psychology perspective, is most psychologists are not trying to get the person who, had the influence over the child in their life. That, they're not trying to necessarily fix or blame the person who caused the trauma.
Right.
They are trying to help the person develop through that trauma and kind of look towards better things.
Yes, you definitely want to empower the individual, not blame the victim. Those are two very different things. You want to empower the individual to overcome their shortcomings, their bad imprinting, however you want to put it, depending on what school of psychology you go to. But yes, it does not help to say that you are the way you are all because of them, and you can't, and this is the message that sometimes is implied, you can't ever get out of your oppression as long as they exist, and whoever they is. So if you're going with, say, orthodox Marxism, we're talking about the bourgeoisie. If we're going with cultural Marxism, it's basically WEIRD. I don't know if you know that acronym.
Weird, I've never heard of that.
Yeah, this is something they're teaching. This University of Oregon Advanced Psychology course. It's supposed to be about psychology, not about social justice indoctrination, but WEIRD. Western, educated, industrialized, rich democracies.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is implied to be bad, and everything else is good. And then colonialism is defined as something that is Western, even though we all know that it's not. Same thing with imperialism, as if there was an imperial Japan in the last century, But anyway, yeah. Geez, I forgot where
I was just saying, they blame everything on capitalism, and a lot of the things that they blame on capitalism are not. They're more complex than what it really is.
Oh, I know what I was going to say. In cultural Marxism, it's not the bourgeoisie per se, but it's the bourgeoisie cis het white male of weird culture. The whole Western, Western straight heterosexual cisgendered, etc., etc.
Yeah, well, I read Communism: A History. It's like just a short book by Richard Pipes, who's he was a Harvard professor. I think he's now like an ex-emerita or whatever you call it when they kind of retire, but they still do work for the university. But he's really old. He's like 90-something. But he's wrote quite a lot of good books about communism and the Russian Revolution. Okay. And he did a pretty good job of at least pointing out the basics of communism and sort of its flaws. And when you look at So when I first kind of looked at Marxist theories, I was like, oh, okay, this kind of sounds like it would be good to sort of distribute the wealth, basically. People who were on top could somehow make sacrifices to help people on the bottom. And then I delved deeper into that. Are we talking
voluntarily in your mind so far, or
I would say voluntarily, yeah.
Okay. So this is your thing.
Yeah, so when I started thinking of this, I was like, I'm not going to force people into making these choices. Mostly, I think I was kind of playing around with the idea of like communes, where people kind of support each other in small communities,
right.
And there's not really a huge reliance on money. And I think that we have seen that to be successful to a certain degree in some communities, like the Amish community, for example, I think is very successful as like a type of commune. But I think for them it works because they have one value system that they all sort of adhere to.
Yeah.
So it's like Christianity is sort of their value system, and of course, it doesn't mean that they're problem free, but it just means that they can at least stick to one ideology and be able to work things out within that framework.
Sure, and it's pretty well established, and they don't have a lot to contest over that. It's not like there's a million different views coming from a million different directions about what should be. It's pretty well established, so yeah, they're going to do well. I mean, things like that can work in small communities in some cases.
And I've tried, I took some time off around the election period. I took about a year in Europe and traveled through Western Europe, and there were some times where I did volunteering at like a farm volunteering type thing. And basically it's like you work for your food type thing.
Yeah.
But I I realized that while, like I'm a fan of Henry David Thoreau and Ralph Waldo Emerson, I really love the idea of simplifying your life and not being, distracted too much by technology, industry, a lot of these different things. And I looked at this idea of simplicity, and it is really fulfilling, but at the same time, being an engineer and sort of interested in technology and growth and research, it's a huge conflict for me because I love the sort of community that comes from being in a small environment like that, where it's like, you work, but it's not necessarily like they're working you to death, but there's sacrifices that you have to make depending on which lifestyle you want to live by. And for some, living in that type of volunteering, environment, sort of, I guess, indentured servitude, you would call it. Some people love it. Some people just want to, have a extended family, I guess, and community. But at the same time, there is a nicety to being independent. There's a nicety to having a capitalist system where I can do something other than try to survive and also still be able to meet my basic needs.
Yeah, and really that would mean that you're more of an outlier, evolutionary speaking. Some people are not happy unless they're actually torching a path or trailblazing or, chopping a new path into that wilderness of the unknown. Some people are content to, just watch TV all their lives, and other people aren't. But just really quick, I've been in a couple of experimental situations where it was an attempt to do some sort of communal living, but, in neither one of these cases did we go without using money to go into town to buy certain things. It's just we weren't anywhere near there yet. But I found that in both situations, even though one of them I was content with chopping my wood for our heat and carrying pails of water for our water, that I was fine with that. I still had my computer. I didn't have internet, but at least I could write a book that I was writing at the time, so I was pretty happy, sort of like, Henry David Thoreau kind of stuff. However, in that situation and in the other one, what happens pretty soon is you, or some people, and I'm always one of those individuals, end up pulling the weight of so many people because they end up being so lazy, and they just know that if they screw off, that you're just going to pick up the slack for them. And that's one of my objections to Marxist systems or leveling systems, whatever your collectivist systems, is that there's always going to be people, kind of like an Animal Farm, Old Major, the horse, I think, is Old Major's name. I don't forget, or Boxer, whatever. The big horse in Animal Farm, he ends up working himself to death because he's the only one who has the strength to do it. Or in my case, I'm the only one who had the responsibility to do things for other people, and I can't stand being the person to pull all that weight. So I like equal opportunity, but not equal outcome.
And that's the problem at the large scale, and that's one of the big reasons why communism failed during its several experiments, was because people had different paths and people had different goals. And the kulaks, the people who own the land, were working really hard trying to feed the entire society, and the government was sort of taking a huge portion of that. And I can understand people don't like the fact that, I think it's also this idea that, like, it's kind of something that maybe not capitalism, but sort of the way our industrial society has become, where we're sort of like little cogs within a bigger machine. Like, I think Adam Smith was the one who talked about distribution of labor. And so we've kind of, we have this bigger system that's so complex now that you almost need people who are specialized in little teeny bits and pieces of this.
Oh, yeah.
So you don't ever really see, like, the whole product, which I think for, like, our human desire to want to create and build things, it's often very difficult for us to be that, like, little tiny piece in the machine and still feel like our job is worthwhile. But I think at the same time, that can kind of happen within the communist society as well.
They call that anomie in sociology, by the way. It's the feeling of being anonymous and alienated because you're just a cog in a machine.
Exactly. And it's like, well, I definitely think that there may be, systems that we can do to improve that. But I also look at it, it's like you can choose that path. You can be, it's frustrating because I'm an engineer And obviously, I'm a big dreams engineer. I think like a lot of people, where you want to do really awesome stuff, and you want to, feel like you're doing like great things. You want to feel like Tesla or Edison or one of these inventors who really kind of did everything themselves and created these great machines and great ideas. But then when you're an actual engineer in a company, you're kind of working on one little piece of the project, and it all seems so mundane.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's very difficult, I think, to kind of fit within that after you've studied something and been really passionate about it. But there is also another side to kind of, I think, our structure is you have the freedom to create and do whatever you want. But the thing is I think in this society, and probably it was the same back then too, because it's like back then it was sort of the bourgeois and the people who had money who were able to really educate themselves and create, big products and big ideas. I mean, now anybody can do that. As long as you do well in school, you work hard, you're able to do whatever you want.
Yeah.
But that's, I think, another beauty is, if you really want to be that person, if you really want to be like the next Tesla, or you really want to be, the next Elon Musk, you're going to have to really dedicate yourself to that. And I think people start realizing that once they get on that path, that it's really hard and that they're going to have to devote a lot of time to it. I think sometimes that's why you get a lot of these sort of new Marxists and new communists, because they want things to be easier and they're hoping for an easier way to achieve their goals.
Yeah.
But they don't realize the impact of these theories. They sound good in an ideal situation, but when you're trying to control a huge economy, and you have people, this is what I've always said about communism: is you have to shape the perfect person in order to fit into a communist society. Everybody has to kind of have the same goals, the same values, the same ideas, and unfortunately, first, I think that's wrong. And second, I just think that that's going to be impossible.
Yeah, it's a utopian vision of human beings. It is assuming that this state will eventually wither away. So first there's the revolution, then there's the dictatorship to safeguard against the counter-revolution, and then supposedly, according to Lenin and Marx and etc., that's supposed to wither away naturally because human beings are so good that any sort of wrongdoing will be, they sort of liken it, Lenin or Stalin, no, let's see, so, okay, let's see here. Even though they claim, quote, this is from Lenin, we are not utopians and do not in the least deny the possibility and the inevitability of excess on the part of the individual persons or the needs to suppress such excesses. But this will be done by the armed people itself, not a government, as simply and as readily as any crowd of civilized people, even in the modern society, interferes to put a stop to a scuffle or to prevent a woman from being assaulted. So basically, it's this vision that if an individual does something wrong, then don't worry, everybody around them will immediately stop that, and then that's it. Then we won't need police, we won't need government, etc., etc., etc. But that's a utopian vision of people. And notice how it's like the two-button meme. One button is the bourgeoisie are inherently evil, and the other button is all people are inherently good. And they can't. Those two don't. They don't.
That's actually a good point. That's a good point for that, because it's two opposing theories that don't match up. I think that when I started reading the Richard Pipes book, I started realizing that a lot of people I think who ascribe to the Marxist ideologies think that the dictatorship happened because they were bad people,
right.
And it's like no,
it's part of the plan.
It kind of it's part of the idea. The idea that you need a revolution in order to actually create your socialist society.
Yeah.
And it's like you create your socialist middle ground and then you switch to communism and then somehow everything all works out.
Yeah,
so,
right here it says, this is a book called Isms and Ologies, and it's, it's pretty objective, and it says, this is Marxism 101, this is orthodox Marxism. Once the dust of the revolution settled, the proletariat would establish a dictatorship so that they could exercise the power needed to expropriate the capitalists' property, because, they're not going to give it over willingly, crush whatever resistance to the new order remained, and rapidly develop the economy. But this dictatorship was merely a transitional phase. Marx promised that as soon as the means of production were firmly in the people's hands, the state, along with its attendant coercive institutions that the bourgeoisie had used to keep the workers in thrall, like religion and traditional family, would swiftly disappear. And as we know, in practice, when has that ever happened?
Yeah.
Never
yeah, because you look at, a lot of the communist parties had tried to meddle in terms of elections as well. So, there's kind of the two processes. There's sort of the force, and then there's the, election way. Mm-hmm. And, but the thing is again, once you start taking more and more, so what's either going to happen is, I think, two things. I think Ben Shapiro touches on this as well, is if you start taxing the rich, to an incredible amount, they're either going to leave the country, or they're going to fight back.
Or just put their money overseas if what they haven't.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Yes, definitely fight back, yes.
And so we're going to lose all of these people who are up top who, yes, there are bad people on the top, but there's also, they also contribute to the economic system. And if it wasn't for them, a lot of us wouldn't have jobs. So there is a huge benefit from people who fit into the higher class categories, and they're able to, like I said, they're able to create jobs, they're able to create economic wealth. And, people who want to subvert capitalism, I think, is sort of ridiculous. And when we're talking about that idea that it's like people can be inherently lazy, I kind of thought about that, and I said, well, is there a chance that in society we could somehow ignore that? You know what I mean? Like somehow we could just deal with the fact that some people, and maybe I should explain this a little bit better. So I look at people who, the ones who are slacking off, the ones who are on welfare, the ones who are not necessarily trying. I think that they're very miserable people. And so when people look to them, I think they often get a little jealous because they say, oh, they're reaping all these benefits, and it's almost like they've got the best deal in the world. But these people are very sad and are very depressed. And I think many of them often are in that situation because they need, it's not that they're crazy, it's just they need some sort of mental help just to, I think, deal with whatever, past problems or upbringings or any of these sort of things. And so, I kind of thought, well, it would be really nice to bring in more psychologists and more psychotherapy type people, sort of normalize that to a certain extent, to be able to allow people to discuss their problems and to become better people. But then you also think about that, it can get kind of scary because then again, who's to know who's a good psychotherapist, who's a bad psychotherapist? As you're telling me that in psychology classes they're teaching this really extreme stuff.
Yeah.
Then you're like, well, how do I know what's true, what's not true? It's it could turn into sort of an Orwellian case, I think.
Oh, sure.
And again, I don't want to force anybody, and that's always been my opinion, is I don't want to force anybody to have to do something that they don't want. But I think what I was trying to do was maybe if we could live in a society such as a universal basic income society where some people are being supported by the state, but they don't end up working, and others want to do something with their lives and others want to create something, could that somehow be a fair and balanced system? And, helping to encourage people to realize, well, these people that aren't working are probably not that happy. But also at the same time, I want to figure out a way, because some people I think have skills that are best suited in a non-working environment. Sure. Some people are really good parents, so it's probably best for them to be a father or a mother. And maybe going out and working is not necessarily something that helps them fulfill their dreams and their goals.
Sure.
So, yeah, just in total, I think, I looked at Marx, I looked at different things, I looked at trying to balance these things out, and had some really good conversations with people while I was on the road. And like I said, there's sacrifices that have to be made. When I was in the, alternative sort of host family community, it was nice to have people that I got along with, but then you also kind of find some of those more extreme people that they sort of try to force their beliefs on you, or they don't like the way that you act, and I think in the host family situation, the volunteering, a lot of these people have to realize that I'm not a permanent sort of volunteer for the for their little community. So my main goal is not to work my butt off to, it's supposed to be kind of a cultural enrichment type situation. And so it's like you get into a situation where sometimes they just want to work you and they just want to use you for work.
Yeah.
And also sometimes you get in situations where like you want to learn and have community through discussion, but they value the work over the community. So I've had people that were host families and other people who didn't like me so well. And there was conflict and it was hard to work out because I didn't know these people that well.
Yeah.
I didn't have them. I think that's why the Amish community works so well, is because they're families. So they're able to settle conflict within a family environment, people that they trust more than random strangers.
Yeah, and they have their traditional family, something which Marxism wants to eradicate, because, if you have loyalty to a family, then the state is secondary to that, or the collective is secondary to that, however you want to look at that. But yeah, the Amish people, they have generations and generations of that stuff, so they've already, worked out a lot of bugs. Again, I don't think we would call it perfect, but you take a bunch of, like deadheads and runaways and people who want to experiment because they're intellectual and put them in the same situation, you end up having problems, personality clashes, and then you get, say, for example, in one of my situations, I'm already a loner. I like to spend a lot of time reading and writing. Everybody else there wanted to socialize all the time, and they just resented the fact that sometimes I wanted to be alone, And
it makes it difficult because, you're sharing rooms, you're sharing spaces.
Yeah.
I also was kind of like, I'm half and half. Like, I get distracted because I like to talk to people, and I have to, like, sort of stop myself because I start talking, and I'm like, man, I really want to read that book, or I really want to study. And that's, like, my biggest weakness is, like, I want to, do other productive things, but I end up socializing more.
Okay, folks, thanks for watching. That's it for the first part of my interview with Matthias Thorpe. Make sure that you have subscribed to me, and if you are on YouTube, make sure you click that little bell icon. Otherwise, you'll never know when I have a new video out. And please make sure you are subscribed to me on BitChute and some sort of backup besides Twitter and YouTube, because I really expect myself to be kicked off of these platforms any day now. Thank you for watching. Love, life, light, liberty, and leaping laughter. See you next time.